So in this step, I'm going to show you how I set up my Sketchfab link, my ArtStation page, as well as how I set up my Photoshop file to do my presentation shot. In this case, I use Sketchfab as my presentation area where you can go see my project, and here is essentially where I kind of just did the lighting for my prop, and my main concern was trying to get the look of my project to be as close to the concept, especially for the lighting. So in the concept art, there is 2 lights that are in the scene. I added 3 in total. There is the blue cooler tone light that is hitting the side of the bookcase that affects this area and this area right here, and there is the light that comes from here affecting this whole area right here. I ended up adding another light up here to be able to add more of that gradient that I did in the textures, because I knew that I was going to be using Sketchfab and I was going to use the environment and the lighting that was in Sketchfab. So even after knowing that and adding in it my gradient, I also wanted to add a light here that would be able to highlight a warmer color up here to, you know, bring attention to that area, as well as bring attention to here and bring attention to this area right here. So this is why it's kind of important to look at your concept for a while and see if there is lighting in your concept and plan your project around that lighting as well. So this is you having to think of, like, you know, 5 steps ahead of you. And in this case, I knew that I would be using Sketchfab, so I knew that my lighting would be a little bit more limited compared to like Marmoset, Unreal, and even sometimes Maya. So knowing that in Sketchfab I could essentially have, you know, a total of probably 5 lights, I wanted to make sure that I at least had 3 lights in my scene that would be able to hit this area, hit this area, and hit the side. Knowing that Sketchfab is very limited in some of the options where I couldn't be able to change my model directly like in Unreal and sometimes even in Marmoset, I made sure to add a gradient within my texture. So that is something that I planned ahead of and added it, as well as being able to move my lights around in Sketchfab to do it. So knowing where my lights are in the scene, I move on to this and wrote down exactly what type of lights that I would need and worked with that. But before I even touch my lights, the first thing I want to do is add my materials to this project. So I essentially use the model that I used in Substance Painter for Sketchfab. It's easier that way because I know that the textures are going to work no matter what. So I imported it into Sketchfab. Fairly easy to do that step. So I go to the materials tab and I go to base color, metal map, roughness, my AO, and my normal map. I plug in the maps that I booted out of Substance Painter. I use the Sketchfab export setting because I knew that this was going to be used in Sketchfab and it's easier to work with that. So that is what I did. I did that to this. It's fairly simple. I didn't have anything crazy. The only thing that probably would have been considered in quotes crazy is adding the feather, which had a opacity channel to it. So I just grabbed a PNG from Google, put it into the base color, and then put it again in opacity, and that's all I really did to that. It's fairly easy. The next thing I did was set up a little bit more of my scene. I changed the field of view from Sketchfab from 90, which I think is the default setting, to 45, and the reason why I do that is if you want to see, that is how it would look in, I believe, the default setting for Sketchfab. So I didn't want to get this fisheye look to it. You can see that, you know, it kind of gives that fisheye look, and that's not what I wanted, since I think it doesn't fit my scene at all or my project. So I would recommend going between 35 to 50 for your field of view. Next thing you can do is change the wireframe. I ended up using black because if I switched it to red, this would be a little bit, you know, lost in the scene. White could probably work pretty well too, but in this case I just used black. Didn't really change that. And then the background, I ended up picking a color that was similar to the concept background because I think it complements it pretty well. It doesn't, you know, distract from the main focus, but at the same time, it isn't such a huge contrast, like super white or super black, for you to be like, you're losing some of the details and shadows. So I picked that color just because I think it does complement it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my post-processing filters so we can focus on the lighting. And in this step, I mainly just focused on my lighting, and the reason why I would recommend you to add your materials before you touch your lighting is to see how your overall model, including the textures, will be affected by the lights. So in this step, the lighting portion, I actually am going to also turn off these so we can focus on the environment. So for me, at least, what I tend to do is I tend to go through each and every environment that I see and write down the ones that I think complement my project. And in this case, I looked through all of them and I ended up really liking how the glazed patio by restaurant looks. I think that it captured the look of the concept from this portion right here. So something I did know I was going to do is I know I was going to have essentially three lights: my environment lighting, the lighting that comes from up top to get this look, and the lighting that comes over here, which is very distinct since it has a certain color and look to it. So in this case, my main focus was getting this area right here lit in a way that I think complements the model, as well as replicating the concept lighting very closely. So I wasn't too focused on how the top was going to look and how this was going to look because I knew that I was going to have lights that would affect that area. So in this case, I wanted to make sure I get, the darker values here and the lighter values here on my model, as well as get these shadows across the project. I wanted to make sure that this is, bright in this area, but having a darker gradient here. So that's why I also added gradients in my textures, because I knew that in Sketchfab it was going to give me that option to do it. So in this in mind, I just mainly focused on getting this area lit. In this case, I liked how this looked, although my project is a little bit washed out. I can always go into my post-processing filters and add a little bit of a redder hue to it. So that is what I ended up doing. So in this case, my main focus was just this area. I got the look that I wanted with the sharp shadows here, which you can see in the concept. I also got a little bit of a highlight there. I ended up getting the shadows that I wanted here, as well as here, where you can see a darker shadow here, and the gradient is moving to a lighter value here. And I quite liked how this looked. Maybe it was a little bit too bright, so if you saw, my original settings for this was 2, and I got what I wanted here. Here I could see, there was going to be a bit of a problem, but I knew I was going to add a light that was going to be a little bit lighter than this. So after setting up this and looking at the different environments there was, I ended up moving over to adding actual lights. So here you have a bunch of different options here. I would never recommend most of these. The 3-point lighting is pretty good by itself. That is what my teacher told me, and it's been working pretty well. So here I used the 3-point light, ended up turning off one of the lights because I didn't need it, and it's fine to do that. Sometimes you might not need all 3 lights in an environment. Sometimes you might just need an environment, a light. So you just have to fiddle a lot around with the settings and feel confident that you just need to feel what is right for you. Another thing, like I've mentioned a billion times beforehand, always get critiques on your lighting. That is what I did, and I ended up actually pushing myself a little bit more to doing more to my project than less. So I have a tendency to do less to my project because I'm afraid of pushing the project a little bit and going back to it. And thankfully, I had a great lab instructor who gave me a great tip, which was, add more light to it. So in this case, what I usually do is I turn off this so everything is black on my model, add my lights, or turn on my lights. So in this case, I'm going to show you how I ended up getting the lighting on the left side. I switched my lights. So I switched my light from a direction light to a spotlight. I think this ended up working a lot better. Then the other option, I mean, you can still have it, but I think it was just a little bit too bright for this, and I wanted to get a softer look to it, and this settings allow me to achieve that look. So you can go through these and just try out whichever light ends up working for you. In this case, it was spot. So I ended up pushing the intensity to the max, added a very blue color to it, since that is what we are shown in the concept, and I just messed around with the settings until I found something that I liked. But what I usually do first is I end up positioning my light, and then I end up moving the settings around because I think that works a lot better. Another thing I did was add cast shadows, because if I didn't, then the entire scene would, or these areas right here, would be lit, which I did not want that to happen. I just wanted to mainly focus on this area. So after setting up this light, which is kind of the same movements that you would do in Maya, you just have to make sure that you are kind of doing a rotation on it while you are setting up your lights, because you might accidentally end up, pushing this down and be like, that looks right. But when you look over here, it's all the way over here. So just make sure you are rotating around to see where your lights are hitting. So after that, I turned this off, added my spotlight, and started on getting the top portion of the lights done. In this case, it was very easy since I thankfully had some practice with the spotlight, so I kind of knew what settings I needed to do. I did a warmer orange colors to affect this area, and again add somewhat of a gradient from here to here, which I ended up achieving. So here I just mainly focus on getting this top portion of the project lit. Wasn't focused on the bottom, just this area, and I just moved around the camera or the light, and I also changed the setting to this. I obviously turned off cast shadows, or turned on cast shadows, so I don't affect the areas down below. I just wanted to affect those areas. So after doing that, I turned on both lights, saw how it looked back at my concept, and I usually have this, open no matter what on the side, but I saw here that I got these two looks achieved, and then after that I added my environment light to it, and saw around it and thought, that looks pretty good. I approve. So the final step that I did here in Sketchfab was essentially add some post-processing filters. So a great thing that Sketchfab has is that sometimes you see here like, oh, my project looks completely different from what it does in Substance Painter. The reason why for that is Substance Painter has different environment setups as well as lighting. So most of the time, the settings that you have in Substance Painter will not look the same as Sketchfab. So you're going to have to work with your project and work with the tools that Sketchfab gives you. And one of the tools that it gives you is this area right here. So in this case, I added some more AO to my project, which is what this tab does right here, the SSAO. Here, it essentially, and if you ever have a question about anything, just hover over the question mark and it will tell you what it does. So here it adds ambient occlusion, and something great is that, say I looked at this project and thought, it really doesn't have a strong, AO map to it. Now I got to go back to Substance Painter, fix it, and then boot out the textures again, replace it here. You don't have to do that. Sketchfab has great tools that allow you to change the project from here. So if you look here, especially in the hinges, you can see the change. You can even see it around the edges, especially, and you can see there is a addition of the AO there. So Sketchfab having this helped a lot since, I added on and saw, that actually does look a lot better. I'm going to do that. So sometimes you might just need to turn on some of these settings and be like, all right, I liked how that looks. Like, see, I thought this was a little bit too reflective for my taste. I turned it off, and you can see the roughness values to it that I was trying to achieve. So after adding this, I added a sharpness to it, just a slight one. It may not be too noticeable in the video, but in Sketchfab it is noticeable, as well as in my photos. So here my main focus was just a little bit of a sharpness, not too much. The next part is a vignette, which brings focus to my project. It draws your eye from here to here very quickly. So I wanted to add a little bit more to this, as well as, add a little bit more of a gradient around the edges than just having it a pitch gray color. Not pitch gray, it's not pitch black, just a gray, darker color. So a vignette just adds to it and brings the focus to your project. The next thing I added was a bloom. I just wanted to give it a little bit more of that fantasy vibe that I felt from the project over. So I didn't add such a huge bloom effect to it. It's honestly just 0.1, but I think it just complements my project enough to make it affect the metals. So I think that worked. And like I said beforehand, Sketchfab has great tools for you to use, so you don't have to go into Substance Painter. So another thing is I ended up adding a color balance for the midtones, especially for the reds. Like I mentioned beforehand, Sketchfab has great tools for you to use. If you don't want to go back to Substance Painter and change your whole maps, you can just do it here and add a bit of a color hue to it, which ended up actually helping me not have my project look so washed out. So these are the post-processing filters that I did to my project. You can come here and turn off and on, change the settings to anything that you feel like your project could benefit from. In this case, I went through all of them, ended up taking out the grain, depth of field, the chromatic aberration, the toning map, because I knew that it wouldn't really affect or help enhance my project. Don't think of these as fixing your mistakes, think of it as enhancing your project. So after working on this, I posed my project in a way that I like, so I'm going to show you how I did that. Since I am trying to get as close to the concept art that I can, I had this open on another screen and tried to angle it where you could see this portion as well as the side and get the flag and the sword in view. So the sword isn't being covered up, but the flag is still noticeable. I'm making sure that you see this engraving, and this engraving because of the time that I spent on it, as well as making sure that you see the best parts of my project and getting this area shown as well without covering anything else or covering this part up. So what I mostly did was I just moved stuff around until I got the position that I wanted. Like I said beforehand, my project was, or my concept was set at an angle, so I wanted to make sure that you could see this from any way and it wouldn't be proportionally wrong, and sometimes you're not able to get it perfectly, but I set it up where you could see it, and that is how I posed my project. You want to make sure that you're posing your project in a way that isn't just a front view, a side view, or a back view. You want to add somewhat of an angle to it to, make sure that you're showing the parts of the project that you spent a lot of time on, and that was my main focus, is showing off this wood engraving that I did in ZBrush, as well as the metal, the sword, the flag, and the area right over here. I made sure to angle my project as well as make sure that everything is in view. So after this, I went into the Sketchfab lab experiments, which allowed me to create a GIF as well as high resolution screenshots of my project, and I'm going to show you how I did that. So here is the lab's Sketchfab experiments. It's right here. It's Sketchfab lab experiments. I apologize. But here you can see that they give you a ton of tools and options to show off your project. In this case, I used the GIF export as well as the screenshots tool. So I'm going to show you this part. I use this mostly for Twitter because I think it shows off every angle of your project, and I think this works best for specifically showcasing on your phone. So in here, all I did was take the URL of my Sketchfab link, load scene, went here, pasted it, went to load, and your project will load up. And the next thing I did was just changed it to HD 720. In this case, this worked pretty well for Twitter. The HD 1080 doesn't allow you to use it on Twitter because of how high it is. So after that, I change the duration of the turntable, which is what it's going to do, for 5 seconds. If you have a project that has a lot of details on the back as well, you can probably change that to 10 seconds so the viewer has enough time to look through it. In this case, since I knew my back is pretty bland compared to my front, I made sure that it was just in 5 seconds, made it a GIF, and rendered it out. So here is the export of my gift in my Mac. It's not going to show me the actual gift. I have to go quickly through it, but this is how it will turn out. And here I just airdropped it over to my iPhone and I had it in place. It's the name of the project that you have on Sketchfab, and it just calls it a GIF. So that is what I did for the first part. This is totally optional. You are not required to do this, or you aren't even, needed to do this. I just think it's helpful for me to showcase it on Twitter or my Facebook for a quick look at if they don't have the ability to open up Sketchfab on whatever device that they're using. After I do that, the next thing I do is I go to screenshots and I load up my scene again. And here it gives you a ton of options to affect your project, especially for the transparent background. So what I usually do is I turn this on so it creates a PNG that allows you to import it into any type of program that you're using to create your screenshot or your presentation shot. So in this case, I am using Photoshop for it. The next thing I did was turn off the vignette because I'm going to add my own vignette to my portfolio shot, but I want to keep on the post-processing filter. So this is what it's essentially adding on to it. So after this, I usually do this in 4K resolution, but since I am just doing a quick one, I'm just going to show you how I did it. So I exported the screenshot of how my project looks default wise, and after that I usually move it around for different angles. I get different shots of the angles that I did, so maybe I just inched it a little bit more, I turned it a little bit more this way, and then after that, after I take around 5 different screenshots of how the project looks compared to the concept, my next step is usually just picking different angles overall. So maybe I want to get more of an angle like this. Maybe I want to get an angle that's closer to this so you can see the details of the wood. Or maybe I got a detail of more of this. So I take around 15 screenshots in total of this project in different angles and different looks, and even sometimes in different lighting. So here maybe I want to add a more dramatic lighting, mysterious look to it. I will screenshot this so I can look at it in Photoshop and see if I like it or not. So this is the presentation shot. I actually got this file from my teacher while I was going through one of my portfolio classes. This was fairly easy to use. You just change the settings in the background to either add new colors, change the texture background, and add different types of vignette, as well as setting up your name, contact information, so you can have it up here. I don't tend to like having my name up here. I like to either have it on either bottom corner. The reason why for this is because I feel like it grabs your attention too much if it's up here, mostly because I read top to down or top to bottom, then bottom to top. So the first thing I'm going to notice is here and then move down to here to get my name, but I want to make sure my name is clearly there. So after this, I pick the vignette I want, and that is how I make my presentation shot. It's pretty easy, to be honest. The way that you guys can set this up is by creating a background colors. You can add a folder of the colors that you think you would be using. In this case, I usually go with mid to dark grays. Sometimes I even do it in a color. Lighter colors tend to work pretty well, so or cooler colors tend to work well, so I go with more blues. This is just, if you want a quick selections of backgrounds. The other thing my teacher did for us was create background textures. This one has different ones. They have pavement, plank wood, brick wall, speakers, clean me. So these are just different ones that he allowed us to pick from. In this case, I just kept it with the volcanic rock. I think it looked pretty decent. I didn't think that I took too much from the project. It just keeps the background from being bland, to me at least. And here I set up my main presentation shot. After this, I bring in 2 other angles of my project, and I would add the first one here. I would make it fill up the screen as much as possible, and then the second one I would add right around here above this and make it smaller. This one would be an angle of this that is completely different from what you see here, and I'm about to show you that when I do show you how I did my ArtStation page. But in this case, I wanted to mainly focus on this piece right here, since this is my final presentation shot that I want to show and be the first thing you see when you open up my ArtStation page. Another thing I would recommend you guys to do, this is something I do a lot, is create a thumbnail shot. This case, I literally just removed my contact information, just had this right here. So when I go into ArtStation, I can pick this file or this JPEG and bring it into ArtStation and set this up specifically to only be my thumbnail so you can see this. After creating roughly around like 3 photos or presentation shots of my project, I move on to ArtStation. So for ArtStation, you can see here that I did create a thumbnail that doesn't have my name or contact information on it. So I click on it and it pops up, and the first thing you see is my first final presentation shot. Important thing to do before you upload anything, make sure you double check to see that your name, your first and last name, is spelled correctly, as well as your email. Pick an email that is user friendly, or at least kind of friendly for anyone who wants to use it. You know, your first name, last name is pretty good, and if that's already taken, just add a 01 to the end of it. That works pretty well. The second shot that I like to post on ArtStation is the different angled of it, and the different side of the project. Again, making sure that my first name, last name, and my email is correct, and then I add a link to my Sketchfab, and it's embedded here into the ArtStation link, so you can click on this and manually, or not manually, but you can see it from here. So after that, I make sure to add a picture of the concept art, as well as give credit right away to the concept artist right here. This is a direct link to the page of the concept artist, as well as the direct page to the concept. And I also make sure to give credit right away to the concept artist down here in the summary page. After that, I go into the settings. It's giving me a little weird thing. I hate when it does that, but if you go into edit, the project thumbnails right here, this is where you can upload your thumbnail and then crop it to the size that you want it to. And then after that, I make sure to tag my project. So this is just so it has a bigger outreach to people and artists on ArtStation. I make sure to add the software experience that I did here, or the software used on this project, which was Photoshop, Maya, Substance Painter, ZBrush, and Sketchfab. I just add digital 3D, fantasy, and game art is the main focus of this project. And then after that, I add a little bio to it, and this is officially, oh, I thought it was going to bring me back to the page, but this is officially just explaining my process of my project. So here I explained that it was an on and off project that I did while I was juggling school. I began the process in December and I ended around early May, so this was roughly around 5 months. There was some things that I explained that I was very proud of learning, like texturing. And then I explained again, harping on the critiques. Any critiques are welcomed, and I gave credit again to the concept artist. So after finishing up my presentation shot and setting up my ArtStation link and publishing my ArtStation link, as well as any of my GIFs on Twitter, Facebook, and any of my Discord servicers that I was part of, I finished the project. So that is the end of my breakdown video. I know that I said a lot throughout these videos, and I harped on a lot of things like critiques and writing stuff down and making sure that you are following through all your pieces in your project, but these are things that were able to allow me to grow as an artist, learn a lot about doing stylized in ZBrush and Substance Painter, and being able to learn from my mistakes that I did throughout this project, because I did do mistakes throughout these projects, and I think it's important for you guys to know that, because, you know, not everything goes exactly the way that you want it to, and that's okay. You just learn from it, and you apply those experiences to other projects that you have. I would love to give a huge thank you and shout out to Stylized Station. They ended up helping me out a lot through this project without them even knowing. Them being able to show off artists helped me find the concept art that I wanted. It helped me find tutorials for this project to learn and base my textures off of. So thank you to them for giving me this opportunity to do a breakdown video for their channel, as well as thanking the concept artist for creating such amazing work for me to base my project off of. I was very passionate about it, and I want to thank them for giving me such beautiful artwork. And the last are all the artists, lab instructors, and teachers who took the time to critique my work. Again, the word critique, but it did help me grow as an artist, and I'm very grateful for the help that they gave me. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope these breakdown videos gave you a better insight on how to approach a stylized prop.